Welcome to our next installment of the series, Origins of the Roman Empire. In the last episode, we looked at the urban development of Rome. We talked about the Servian city division, the Seven Hills, and the ancient Palatine city. The foundation of Rome resulted from a merger of several communities, the Luceres, Titis, and Ramnes. The relationship between the urban settlements and the three communities is not apparent. As they were originally independent communities, they must have settled on their own in the beginning. An exception could have been on the hills. There they most probably did not live in separate enclosures. With the founding of Rome, they gradually dissolved into the districts. Theodore Mommsen assumed in his work that Rome was founded from the Palatine and Quirinal districts. Other small settlements left out of the equation. The Palatine city roughly enclosed the first three tribes, Palatina, Suburana, and Esquilina. The Quirinal, the fourth, Collina. Not only the Palatine city was enclosed by the Servian walls, but also the neighboring city on the Quirinal. The old capital, Capitolinum Vetus on the Quirinal, had a sanctuary of Jupiter, Juno, Minerva, and a temple in which state treaties were publicly displayed. This was a clear reflection of the later capital, on which the same temples stood, indicating that the Quirinal was also once the center of an independent polity. The same can be seen from the dual cult of Mars on the Palatine Hill and the Quirinal. The god Mars was the oldest main god of the Italic civil communities. This is related to the fact that his servants, the two ancient associations of the Salian priests and Luperci, English wolves, were present twice in later Rome, one on the Palatine and one on the Quirinal. Ovidius's work shows that the Quintic wolves of the Palatine had a higher rank than the Fabian wolf guild on the Quirinal. The signs are important for understanding how the city was structured. The first people settled on the Palatine Hill and increasingly occupied the nearby lowlands as the city grew. This is where the Subura was created, which extends to the border of the Quirinal and was fortified for protection. The men on the Quirinal differed in name from their Palatine neighbors. The Palatine city called itself of the Seven Mountains, its citizens of the mountains, Montani. Even if the term mountain could also apply to the other hills, it is particularly attached to the Palatine. The Quirinal peak, although even higher, is never referred to as a hill, collis, in precise linguistic usage. In sacred documents, the Quirinal is often referred to as the hill, without further adjectives. Similarly, the gate leading from this height is called the Hill Gate, Porta Collina. The Marian priesthood located there is called the one coming from the hill, Salii Collini, and the fourth Servian quarter formed from this district is called the Hill Quarter, Tribus Collina. The later name of Quirinalis is not based on the name of the Quirites. Quirites was a ceremonial and poetic term for the citizens of ancient Rome and was synonymous with the more recent term cives Romani, Roman citizens. The name has a different origin coming from the name Mars Quirinus. It is important to mention that Mars and Quirinus were two separate deities, though not perhaps in origin. Mars Quirinus was the protector of the early mentioned Quirites as divided into citizen assemblies, whose oaths were required to make a treaty. As a guarantor of treaties, Mars Quirinus is thus a god of peace and not of war. Mars Quirinus was worshipped both on the Palatine and on the Quirinal. To distinguish between the two, he was later preferably called Mars on the Palatine and Quirinus on the Quirinal. Both cities called themselves Hill Romans, Romani Colony, and thus claimed the right to call themselves Romans. Whether there was a tribal difference between the two neighboring cities is possible, but the evidence is insufficient. There is the hypothesis that the citizens of the Quirinal Hill migrated from Sabine territory. It has not been proven that the ancient sanctuaries on this hill are Sabine. Mars Quirinus, Sol Salus, Flora Simosancus, or Deus Fidius are probably Sabine as well as Latin deities, apparently formed in the era when Sabines and Latins still lived together peacefully. It can therefore be stated that at the beginning the hill Romans of the Palatine and the hill Romans of the Quirinal were still two separate and undoubtedly feuding communities. The Palatine outweighed the Quirinal by far early on, as can be concluded both from the greater extent of their suburbs and from the relegation of the former hill Romans to the 4th district in the later Servian order. But even within the Palatine city, it was difficult to achieve a complete fusion of the various components. The story of the horse's head between Palatine and Subura has already been told in the previous episode, but the individual hills and even the individual curia were also separate. There was therefore no real city centre. Rome can therefore be described as the epitome of an urban settlement. It was not a uniform city. Some of the houses of the old and powerful families were built like fortresses, probably to defend themselves against people from other settlements. It was not until the Great Wall construction, which is attributed to King Servius Tullius, that this came to an end. Not only the two cities of Palatine and Quirinal, but also the hills of the Capitoline and the Aventine, which were not yet included in their rings, were surrounded by a single large ring of walls, thus creating the new Rome, the Rome of world history. In the next episode, we will be looking at the Roman family and the pater familias. See you next time, your geek philosopher.